Hi, and welcome to our first ever Cyberbills Tug, hosted by Confused.com. For those who don't know, we're the first price comparison in the UK almost 20 years ago. We're now operating in an extremely competitive market. This means every advantage counts, which is why data is so important to us. It's fundamental for driving decisions, and this is why we need accurate and timely data available to our business. Dave will be talking later in the talk about how Tableau has enabled us to deliver this and our journey to get there. But first, I'm Rachel Davis, and I'm the Business Intelligence Team Leader at Confused.com. I manage a number of the analysts across the 4 analytic teams, and I'm responsible for driving our data analytics strategy. I've used Tableau for a number of years to deliver automated business reporting, and I'm currently supporting and driving the team to focus business decisions through Tableau. Gemma.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and a really warm welcome to our brand new user group, and thank you for joining us. So I'm Gemma O'Neill. I am a BI analyst, also with Confused.com. I joined the company earlier this year, and along with Rachel and Georgia, I'm co-leading this user group, and I also organise our internal Tableau activities and initiatives like our Tableau doctor sessions, which we run as a drop-in on a Friday. And also things like our data viz team days, where we get to collaborate using external data sources from places like Makeover Mondays and also Kaggle.
Thanks, Gemma. The third leader of this tag is Georgia, who's managing us behind the scenes, and she'll be taking your questions through the Q&A. Georgia's worked at Confused.com for 5 years now, and more recently within the BI team, where she's currently improving the delivery of our reporting and insights and embedding Tableau into our decision making. So sorry if you attend a number of these and know the drill, but a few quick housekeeping points. This is a live and recorded Zoom webinar. So this means you are muted, but there is a chat function so you can talk to the other members of the audience. However, if you do have questions for any of the panelists, then please send them through the Q&A section and we'll try to answer them. The recording will be uploaded to the Tableau YouTube channel following this tag. And now I'm going to pass you back to Gemma to take us through the agenda.
All right, so let's go through the agenda for today. So we have some amazing speakers lined up for you from across the Tableau community. Again, I'd just like to say a big thank you to for all of them for giving up their time today for our launch. So the first talk will be Tableau Speed Tipping, 20 tips in 20 minutes, presented by Heidi Kalbe. Heidi will show you some great Tableau hacks in just 20 minutes that will help you save precious time each day. Then we will have David Lomax presenting Tableau at Confused.com, talking about our Tableau journey, so where we've come from and where we're going to. Then next up will be Christopher Harry talking about and demonstrating interactivity in Tableau. So some great tips on how to make your dashboards more interactive using parameters and actions. And then finishing us off today will be Sarah Bartlett with Certifiably Tableau, a guide to Tableau certifications, explaining all about Tableau learning paths, sharing some tips and resources, and why getting certified is good for your career. Okay, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of our fantastic speakers today. So first, as I said, we'll have Heidi. Heidi is an analytics evangelist at the Information Lab in Germany and is co-leader of the Data Plus Women Germany group, Tableau group. Heidi is also a Tableau social media ambassador, and Heidi does what she does best, inspire others with her passion for a company-wide analytics culture. And a fun fact about Heidi is that Heidi loves, there's only one thing that Heidi loves more than Tableau, and that is alpacas. I second that, Heidi, definitely. I think they're really cute. So you'll also find Heidi's social media links, and be sure to check these out. We're also delighted to be joined by Sarah Bartlett. Sarah is a 2-time Tableau Zen Master and Tableau Social Ambassador, a senior analytics consultant at Slalom in London, helping clients to overcome their data challenges and to visualize their data more effectively in Tableau. Sarah holds 3 certifications in Tableau Desktop and is the founder of IronQuest, a monthly visualization initiative which helps people to prepare for the Iron Viz competitions. And you can also check out her blog and find her over on Twitter at Sarah Loves Data. Next, I'd like to introduce our very own David Lomax. So David is a product analytics team leader at Confuse.com and a Tableau desktop certified associate. He's been using Tableau for around 4 years and leads a team of business intelligence analysts in supporting product and commercial teams at Confuse.com. So you can find David, you can contact David, via email or find him over on LinkedIn. And I'd also like to introduce our very own Chris Harry. Chris is a BI analyst, also with us here at Confused. He joined the company back in early 2020. He uses Tableau daily to deliver interactive dashboards for our business stakeholders, as well as delivering insight and aiding business decisions through ad hoc analysis and projects. And you can also contact Chris via email and also find him over on LinkedIn. Okay, so let's get started. As I mentioned, Heidi's going to be kicking us off today. And if you have any questions, just pop those down in the Q&A. So Heidi, over to you.
Thanks, Gemma. All right, so let me just share my screen real quick. And let me move that window to the side. And here we are. So welcome. Thanks for inviting me to the first ever South Wales Tableau user group. I'm really honored to be here. And I'm excited to share a couple of tips with you. So I've been using Tableau for more than 4 years now. And over the years, especially as a BI consultant and also as evangelist, you pick up a couple of things. And it's often tiny things that make our lives just that little bit easier. And I have actually 21 tips that I want to share with you, and I'll probably take a bit longer than 20 minutes, but honestly 21 minutes and 21 tips in 23 minutes just doesn't sound as catchy. So you can find me on Twitter at the Heidi K, and also you can find all of these tips laid out in my blog. So everything I'm showing you is already written down with screenshots and GIFs and everything. So I have one thing to ask of you, and that is, do not try to click along. Do not try to take notes. As I said, it's all written down. And if you try to somehow click along or take notes, chances are that you'll miss a lot. So please just watch and enjoy. And without further ado, I'll get started. So this first tip is about formatting. In here, I have the amount of hours it took us to do our taxes in 2011 and in 2012. If I click a country, I can see how many more hours or fewer hours it took people to do that. But I want to make this really obvious to people. So I'd love to have an upward arrow or a downward arrow or triangle or anything like that in here. And I can actually do that by simply formatting this field. What I'm going to do, I'm going to right click format, and I want to format this one field that I have. And now, as I want a special character, I go to any browser window of my choice, and I'm going to Google, or whichever search engine you prefer, a UTF-8 symbol. So in my case, I'm looking for triangles, and UTF-8 is let's say, a special character alphabet that you can use in any kind of coding language, including Tableau. So I'm going to copy this one downward triangle here, and I'm going to copy an upward triangle as well. And if I go back to Tableau, I can go in here and go to custom. So you can see I have this the positive numbers in front. So I'm going to copy the upward triangle in that, and I want my downward triangle for the negative numbers here. And you can see that's already popping up. And let me actually insert a plus here to make it really, really obvious. So for negative numbers, I now have the downward triangle and the minus. For positive numbers, I have the upward triangle and the plus, but I want to make it even more obvious, because if I have 0 values, I still have the upward triangle and plus, and that's just not the case, right? So let me just Google, what is it, plus and minus sign. And again, let's copy this from anywhere really. So I can even copy it right from this interface, because I actually have, I can add in another semicolon in here, and then we have our 0 values. So now I have the downward triangle minus for negative values, upward triangle plus for positive values, and just the plus minus 0 for 0 values. So that was tip number 1. Tip number 2, maybe I don't want the numbers. Maybe I don't care how much longer it took me. I just want to know it took me longer or took me less time than before to do my taxes. So of course I could do a calculated field and do, okay, if that difference is above 0, then let's say more time, etc. But I don't want to. I don't want to type in a calculation. So again, I can do that just by formatting this number that we already have here. So I'll get rid of everything and I can simply type in text here. So let's say it took me more time for positive values, a semicolon. It took me less time for negative values, and another semicolon for the 0 values, and we'll type in same amount of time. So if I click negative values, we can see less time, more time for positive values, and same amount of time for 0 values. Now, if you've been working with Tableau, you know there's a couple of fancy chart types, including bubble charts and word clouds. Honestly, like they don't hold as much, let's say, analytical value as other charts do, but they are kind of fancy. So wouldn't it be nice if we could do a kind of word cloud or a bubble chart, but with shapes? That would be cool, right? And we can kind of do that. So remember what I told you about UTF-8 signs? Well, I showed you a couple of geometric characters, but actually there's a whole lot more. So if we Google, for example, UTF-8 pictures or something, you will find a load of them. So in here I can say we have alarm clocks, we have watches, we have pieces of pizza, we have a cup of coffee, we have stars, we have tulips, roses, etc. So lots of images that we have at our disposal here. And what I did, I simply took the words that I had, copied them, so duplicated them, and inserted aliases. So for agriculture, I have this leaf thingy, and for food, I have a cup of coffee, and for entertainment, I have these musical notes. So if I drop these on words instead, then I kind of have a bubble chart with symbols, right? But it's simply just a word cloud with UTF-8 shapes. So that way you can bring even more fun with even less analytical value to your analysis. So sometimes I want to label my bars, and let's say I want to have my, I want my year in here. So we can either label the left-hand side, or we can label the outside end. But what if I want to label inside the end of my bar? So not outside, but rather on this position right here. Or we can't easily do that, but we can accomplish this by simply duplicating this field. And then I have this second axis, and I want to make this a Gantt bar. So you can see I have only this little line here, and I can label that Gantt bar on the left-hand side. And you can probably already see where I'm going with this. So I'm actually going to get rid of this other label. I don't need to label my bars anymore. And I can simply right-click, make this a dual axis. And since it's the same value, please remember to synchronize. And then we'll get rid of this secondary axis. We don't need that anymore. And now I'm labeling the inside end of my bar. So that's one option of doing it. What I could also do is I could simply add in a reference line. So either via right-clicking on the axis or going to analytics and adding a reference line. And in this case, I want it to be for every single cell because I want every bar to be labeled. And in here, I do want a label. I want the value. Don't necessarily need a tooltip, and I don't want a line. I want this to be invisible. And what I can do now, I can format this, and I can change the alignment of my label. So I could even label on the left-hand side, and I could, for example, label on top of my bar. So right above it instead of in the middle. So lots of ways how I can label this. If you've used the pages feature, this helps us to leaf through a number of filter values. So for example, I'm looking at inbound and outbound tourism in different world regions. So in Asia, Europe, Middle East, Oceania, and the Americas. And I want to print this. For whatever reason, I want to output to PDF, and I can do that by simply going to File and Print to PDF and just the active sheet. And yeah, let's actually open this up. So if I hit OK, I can save this just anywhere, and Tableau will open this right up for me. But the thing is, now I only get one page, so just the one page that I currently had in Tableau. So you can see just one page, and it's just the Americas. All the other world regions are gone, and that's not what I want. I want to be able to print one PDF page per Tableau page that I have. So how can we do that? I simply go to File, and I go to Page Setup, I think. Yeah, and then we have it at the bottom. So you can see on the General, we have the Pages shelf, and currently it's only printing the current page. But instead, we could make Tableau show us all pages. So let's hit OK again, and let's try that again. So I'm going to print a PDF. And yes, I do want to overwrite. And now we get one PDF page per Tableau page that we had. And just wait a second for this to come up. And there we go. So now we have Africa, Asia, Europe, Middle East, Oceania, and the Americas all in one PDF with just one click. Sometimes when you write calculations, you are still kind of working on them. So your calculations may look something like this. So you have some older elements in here. For example, I started doing this in hours, but then decided I don't want to do that. So I commented it out and have another calculation in here. But what if I want to switch back from days to hours? So commenting this out is super easy, just pasting two slash symbols. But if I want to get rid of all of these, I would have to go through every single row and remove these. And that's honestly kind of exhausting. And especially if you have longer calculations, you don't really want to do that. So wouldn't it be nice if we could highlight everything at once? So if we try that by just using the mouse, it will of course highlight the whole row, and we don't want to get rid of all of that. That would be ridiculous. But we can use the Alt key. I don't know what it's on Mac, but on Windows, it's the Alt key to highlight symbols underneath each other. Would be clever to do both of them. Sorry, that was, let me try again. Yeah, there we go. And now I can remove all of these at once. And now I have my time to fund in hours, and you can see that my values in the background will change. Sometimes, if for some elements you will need ad hoc calculations, for example, for your donut chart, you will probably have something like the aggregate of minimum of 0 and have that again. And then you have these really confusing headers on the left-hand side, and the axis have the weird headers, etc. So I would like to be able to distinguish between these two, because for now I have aggregate of minimum of 0, and then I have aggregate of minimum of 0, 2. So that's a bit confusing. So what we can do in here, I can double click in my ad hoc calculation, go to the first position, and with 2 slashes, type in the title that I want here. And this one should be my dough. And now hitting Shift and Enter, I can do a line break. And if I hit Enter again, you can see that this field is renamed. The axis is renamed, as is this header on the left-hand side in my marks card. And I can do the same for my other calculation. Again, go to the first position, and this should be my donut hole. Use Shift and Enter to do a line break, press Enter again, and now I can easily distinguish what these axes are for and can get rid of them by not showing the header here. And one added benefit of this tip, so this is tip number 9, is if I now draw this over and drag this to my data pane, you can see that Tableau automatically keeps that name, and I don't even think, yeah, it does still retain that in the fields, but it also is used as the header. if you've been in the data viz world for a while, you know that there's a lot of discussion around are we allowed to kind of truncate our axes? And the answer is, if you're using a bar chart, do not ever truncate your axes. That's very important. But with line charts, I mean, it's a bit of a toss, right? We could truncate, we could not, and these values are pretty close to one another, so they range between 54 and 44%. So it would kind of be nice to truncate my axes, but not all end users might like that. So I would love to give them a choice, and we can do that. So what do? I will first create a that will be called zoom axis ? So that they know what they can do. And I will have a Boolean value in here, and for true, let's say yes, and for false, let's say no. And let's actually show this one and make this a list so that we can see what's going on. And now I just need a calculated field, and this will be my 0 line. So if I want to zoom my axis, then I don't want anything in here. And in any other case, I want to have the value 0. That's everything that there is to it. But what are we going to do now? I will drop this to detail and add in a reference line using this 0 line that I have in here. I don't want a computation. I don't want a label. I don't want a tooltip. And I don't even want a line in theory, but we're going to use one anyway right now. Just make this really bright and fat and bold so that we can see what's going on. So for the moment, we can't see anything. And that's fine, because you remember we had that value null. But if I go to no, then we can find our 0 line. Why is this important? We can now go to the axis and edit that one. And in here, I could make it fixed, but I don't want to. I want it to remain dynamic. So I leave it on automatic, but I untick this box, include 0. For the moment, nothing changes because I still have my 0 line in here, right? But if I change zoom axis to yes, then the 0 line vanishes and my axis is truncated. If I go back to no, I don't want to zoom, then my 0 line is back. And this is why the axis will be formatted in a way that it includes 0. So now I can simply edit this line, and I can have no line at all. So users won't even understand how this magic happens. All right, let's look at a map. So in here, I just have a population per country, and you can see that I have colored my bubbles by region, and I would love to have the tooltip colored as well. So just shade the tooltip, but we can't easily do that, right? Just using the color features in here. So what are we going to do instead? I have created a secondary sheet, and in here I'm going to create an ad hoc axis, just minimum of 1. So this should give me a bar. That's perfect. And I actually want to fix my axis. In this case, I want it to be fixed to 0 and 1, so that the bar fills the whole page. Now I can get rid of my axis, and I want the bars also to fill the whole row. And now I already have everything labeled. I can get rid of the country, so I don't want to show the header, and I want this to fit the entire view. Now this looks kind of ridiculous, and that's perfectly fine. That's actually some of the opacity, that's better. And we don't necessarily need this sheet, so we're never going to look at it as is. But if I go to population per country, I can go to tooltip, get rid of all of the text in here, and insert a sheet. So this will be my tip 11. And in here, I can change how high this tooltip will be. And now, if I hover over something, you can see that it, which is essentially the bar chart from the other sheet in here. So that's how we can shade our tooltip. Another tip for color. So sometimes I want to color my bars and everything just has the same color. And if I go to more colors, well, I mean, I have 16 million colors at my disposal, and I could type in my HTML value, but honestly, I don't necessarily know my, let's say, corporate colors by heart. So I already have that as a custom palette somewhere in Tableau, but I can't find it if I don't assign a field to color. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to double click and just type in anything in here. Really, it doesn't matter. And I will move this field to color. And now if I edit my color, I have this whole, all my color palette at my disposal, and I can choose whichever color I fancy. So I can reach my corporate colors now and my custom color palette. If we're looking at values over time, sometimes we want to set certain aspects. For example, I want to dynamically color historical all-time highs. So for example, 2000 at the time was the highest value ever. 2001 at the time was the highest value ever. 2002 wasn't because 2001 was higher, etc. And we can do that by creating a calculated field to show historical highs. And in here, I want to know whether the sum of energy usage was the same as the running maximum of the sum of energy usage. So this basically checks whether it's the highest yet. And if I drop this on color, you can see this is simply a true false field. And let me actually change these colors a little bit. Then you can see whenever a value is the highest yet, it will be colored darker. And if it is not a historical high, it will have that lighter gray color. So sometimes you will want to use a geo field that is not a geo field. So what do I mean? If I want to take a look at my countries, you know that I have my world regions in here, and I can put them on color. And if there's a map, every region will be colored. But I don't want to show every individual country. So I just want one big field for the Americas and one big field for all of Europe. I don't want the individual countries in here. But if I take out the countries, then Tableau doesn't know what to do, because region, well, it's just a text field, right? It's just a string value. So I want to make this a geographical field. I can simply click on it and assign a geographical role, but none of these fit. Unfortunately, we can create a role from countries. So Tableau basically adds all the underlying countries together and creates our polygons that we can use to show our regions. And it will calculate that in just a couple of seconds. And here we go. So now I have one field for all of Africa, one field for all of Europe, etc. Very easily done. And you can see it even created a hierarchy for me to show that region is composed of different countries. So that's tip number 14. Tip number 15, sometimes I want to color the background. So let's say I want a really outrageous bright color to color my seas. And we have a couple of options. So if I go to map and map layers, I mean, I can choose to have a dark background. So we have dark seas. I can even go to satellite, then my seas kind of turn darkish blue, but that's not what I want. I want the seas to be really, really colorful. So what can I do? I choose any color, any kind of map style, and I remove my base. So I don't want the base in here. Nothing seems to change all that much. But if I go to format shading, I can now color my whole worksheet. And let's actually take a really bright yellow. And now you can see my seas turn yellow, all by removing the base and just coloring the worksheet. Sometimes you want to add a little dash of color to your dashboard, but you know that people will want to print them for whatever reason, and they're not going to print them if everything is a bright color. That would use too much ink, right? So wouldn't it be nice if we could add in a little button that would say, hey, make me white? and then so that they could print it, and then they'd also have the option to color it again. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. So what is the magic behind this button? This is actually just a show hide button, as you can see if I edit this. So this is just a dashboard item to show or hide other items. And what is it showing or hiding? So if I double click this, you can see this is actually just a floating container for my title and for my chart that I have in here. And in the background is another floating container, and this one can be shown or hidden by simply using this button. So that's all there is, just floating a couple of images on top of one another and then hiding the one that makes it colorful. But what if we want to be able to pick from multiple colors? So I don't simply want to switch between white and green. I want to have all the colors at my disposal, and we can do that. So you can see I simply created a color picker. This is essentially a simplified pie chart. So not much going on. I just put any field on color, simply one that had many different values, and I colored them in the colors of the rainbow. So this is actually one a standard color palette that you will find in Tableau. So you have this U circle. So you could, in theory, do that yourself as well. And I have another sheet, which is just a tree map using all of these elements. And I also used a set. So you can see I have this color set. Everything is currently in the set. And I have this in the filter, just keeping the members that are in the set. And this is important. So what happens now? Again, I'm floating all of this. So you can see that I'm floating that on top of the tree map that I have in the background. And I also have my color picker in here. And now I'm going to add a set action. So in here, go to dashboard actions and then add a change set values action. And when I click on the color picker, I want to edit my set and I want to assign those values. And let's actually do that on hover. And I want to keep the set values. So what happens now? If I hover over anything here, that will be added to the set. And since there is the filter on that set in the tree map, this will automatically change to the color in the set to only display that one color. But maybe users don't know that. So what is going to happen? They will simply move their mouse anywhere, and then suddenly they have a different background color. So it would be nice to give them some kind of instructions on how to use this. And we can do that by simply going to dashboard and copy image, or just take a screenshot. And then you go to any kind of, let's say, image creating or layouting software of your choice. Personally, I always use PowerPoint, I will admit. And we simply paste this in here. And then we can add any elements that we want. So in my example, I want to, let's actually, give me a sec. We're going to move this to the background. So I want to add in an arrow that really boldly points towards the color picker. And I also want to add in this kind of frame that helps me size everything, because otherwise this would be just any size, and I want this to be sized perfectly to the dashboard. So what now? I can now highlight this frame that I have and the arrow and whatever other element you have in here, and right click and save them as a picture. And what can I do in Tableau? So back in Tableau, I again can add any kind of vertical element and drag an image in here and select that overlay that I have. So in my case, I've already done that. So let's actually undo these last two steps. And then I have added in another show height button. So you can see in here, my image in a floating container, and I can simply show and hide this. And since it is transparent, that will always be visible and it will always retain whatever is in the background. So you already noticed that this is kind of distracting, because sometimes, let's say I want to select this nice teal color, and then I move my mouse off and suddenly it's pink in the background. I don't want that. So hover action maybe is not the best option to do this. But if I change this to a select action, the trouble is that when I click something, everything else will be grayed out, and that's just distracting. I don't want that. I want to click something and still have everything else shown. And we can do that by adding in a highlight action. That takes us a couple steps. So first of all, I'm gonna create a calculated field, which will help me deselect. And in here, I'm just gonna call this deselect. That's everything there is to it. So this will write the string deselect into every single row of my data. And let's simply put this to detail. So now every single element of these contains the word deselect. Why is that important? Well, I can now, let's actually change this action just for a second to keep the set values. I can now add in a highlight action. And clicking on the color picker will affect only the color picker, and this should only highlight the select or the deselect field. So what happens? What actually happens when we click something is that it highlights, it doesn't necessarily highlight as much as it grays out everything else. But now I told Tableau to highlight everything that contains the word deselect. And you remember that everything contains the word deselect. So if I click something, everything else will still be shown just by using a secondary highlight action. All right, so tip number 20, you can move these elements around using your arrow key, but if we use them just simply, this is going to be awfully slow. So instead, we can press our shift key, and that will move it a lot faster. So this is actually moving it 10 pixels at the time, while just the arrow key will move it 1 pixel at a time. So shift and arrow makes this a lot faster. And sometimes, and this is my bonus tip, you may want to add in comments for developers or for yourself while you are still building this. And we can do that by simply adding in a floating text element. And in here, so let's make this really bold and difficult to miss. Important text for developers. We don't want the end users to see this box. But how are we going to do that if it's floating in the middle of the dashboard? Well, we can simply drag it outside the dashboard. But if we try to grab it and drag it, Tableau will simply throw it off. That's not what we want. So what can we do? We can use our shift and arrow key to move it to the, very edge of the dashboard. So that's one option. Now it's kind of outside, but we really, really want to make sure that people don't see this. So we have two options. We can either go to layout and type in an X position that is very much outside, or we can simply use the sides and move this side and then move the other side a bit further. So any developer will see this text, but the end users will not. And with that, that's 21 tips in 23 minutes. If you want to get in touch, please do. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find my Tableau public profile. Please feel free to chat me up on Twitter. And again, you can find all of these tips on the queenofdata.net at my blog. So with that, have a lot of fun in the rest of the Tableau user group.
Thanks, Heidi. I'll definitely be trying those tips after this myself. Remember, you can ask any questions that you have for Heidi in the Q&A, and she'll try to get to them. So our next speaker is Dave Lomax, and he's going to be taking us through our confused.com journey.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And thank you to Heidi as well. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So I'm just going to talk to you today through our reporting journey at Confused.com and how we've tried to improve our reporting suite over the last few years in order to provide the right level of support to our stakeholders and to the business as well. So firstly, a quick introduction to myself. So I've worked in analytics roles for around 8.5 years now, previously within retail and supply chain. And then I joined Confused.com as a BI analyst in 2017. This was actually the first time I'd had any exposure to Tableau. Previously, the only tool we had available to us was Excel. So we used it as a kind of all-round viz tool and a query editor and a database as well. So yeah, it was kind of really eye-opening when I first came here and started using Tableau, just how easy it was to do simple tasks, whereas in Excel it'd be, simple requests were quite time-consuming to get the data in and create the graphs you wanted off the back of it. In Tableau, it's just a case of drag and drop based on some readily available data. So yeah, it was really blew my mind as to how easy analytics and visualization in particular could be. So today I lead a team of 5 product analysts within our BI team. And we provide insight on our customer journey and our commercial partner performance. And Tableau is central to all of our reporting capabilities. So the product analytics team are a subset of the wider analytics team at Confused.com. And we cover product, commercial, marketing, B2B, and data science as well. However, whilst these are our main departments that we support, ultimately we field requests from all over the business, from finance, assurance, IT, HR, infrastructure. Basically, and any one of the employees at the company could be our stakeholder at any point in time. So we really do champion reporting and analytics across the whole business. What's consistent across the business is our primary analytics tool, and that is Tableau. Every employee has access to Tableau server. And whilst we do have some folders which are locked down to specific teams, our core dashboards can be viewed by anyone across the business. We very much have a culture of being data-driven and making sure that every decision we make as a business is informed and led by the data that we have available to us. But in order for that to be possible, accessibility is key. So it's important we have one version of the truth, and every team member is singing off the same hymn sheet, or in this case, the same data source. As I mentioned previously, one of the great things about Tableau is how intuitive it is and how easy it is to create visualizations. And this opens up further opportunities for us to really promote self-service across the wider business and allows us to empower all of our team to develop their data skills by accessing data themselves and building their own dashboards. So when I joined Confused.com 4 years ago, I was completely new to Tableau. So the first few dashboards I created were fairly basic and lacked any real functionality. But the thing they did have was my own personal stamp. And by that, I mean, they all followed a certain style, and that was a style that I liked. And this was a feature of the kind of wider team at the time, in that everyone had their own style of dashboarding, whether that be through the layouts they used, the type of filters, the color schemes, or the fonts. You could often tell who had created a dashboard just by looking at the style without even having to look at who was tagged as the owner on it. Now, this is great for kind of analysts and their development because it promotes creativity. And there's also an element of allowing a person to develop their own personal brand in their work. However, for our stakeholders, it wasn't such a positive experience, because ultimately every time a new dashboard was published, it would look slightly different. So the first thing they would have to do is familiarize themselves with where the filters were and where to find the key information and what all the definitions meant. And this lack of consistency also led to a few trust issues as well, because ultimately our stakeholders had no way of knowing for sure if a dash had gone through any form of quality control. So they didn't really know how trustworthy it was. So you can see here a few examples of some dashboards that were published several years ago. And you can see that despite coming from the same team, they all are quite different in the styles that they use. And this ultimately is what faced stakeholders every time they went into a dash to find key information to drive business decisions. It all just looked very unfamiliar. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of these dashboards in isolation. Ultimately, they all serve a purpose, and they all give the stakeholder the information they need. But the issue is there's no consistency in the layout. So some have headers and are branded, and some don't. Each has filters in a different location and with different aliases and different styles of dropdown. And as such, every time the stakeholder goes into one of these reports, the first thing they have to do is relearn how to navigate around it. And ultimately, this is taking focus away from the bits that really matter, and that's the analysis and the data. Also, they have no idea if the data source is reliable. So they won't know if the data is being provided from by an improved Tableau server data source. It could be a custom SQL query. It could just be copy and pasted in. So therefore, it makes it really difficult for the stakeholders to know if they can really rely on what they're being told through each dashboard. So one of the other issues we had with our dashboarding previously was that it was notoriously hard to find the measure you were looking for. And very often we had multiple dashboards showing the same metrics, and these sometimes varied without any real explanation as to why the numbers were different. So rather than using what was already available, our stakeholders would just come back to us again and ask for the same metrics. And it just became a bit of a vicious circle. We didn't make use of the tags feature, and we had no clear reporting or naming structure when we published dashboards. And often dashboards would be named according to the ticket number they were associated with. So even if we had made metrics available previously, the stakeholders couldn't find them. They'd come to us, and as analysts, we then couldn't find them. And in the end, we just ended up duplicating a lot of work. So why did we want to change? Well, firstly, we wanted to stop duplicating work so much. And this would then allow our analysts to work on new pieces of work which would add further value to the business. Also, we wanted a better experience for our stakeholders and end users. One of the big complaints we had from our senior levels was that they didn't know where to find the information and the reporting they needed. So it was clear we needed a much more transparent structure if we really wanted to embed reporting and analytics across the whole business. The first thing we did was have our core team sit in a room together and hack out what our key metrics were across the business. So once we had identified what we needed to report on, we then decided how each metric related to one another and what would be the most sensible structure for grouping these measures together. So we ended up with a reporting hierarchy plan, which essentially identified which areas of the business needed which business questions answering, and which dashboards needed to be built in order to answer those questions, and what metrics should be included in each of those dashboards. We also identified a number of questions that we couldn't currently answer based on the data that we had available to us. So this fed a separate work stream then to ensure that we did have those data sources available with that data, and ensure that those data sources were as performant as possible, both for us as analysts, but also for self-service around the business. Another thing we did was create a dashboarding standards document, and this now acts as an analyst's Bible. Any dashboard that is published on the server must meet the requirements and standards agreed upon by the whole team. And this is to ensure that the tools we provide to our stakeholders are of a sufficient quality for them to be able to make good business decisions off the back of them. As well as outlining the standards, we also put together a template for how a dashboard should look. And any dashboards being published must first be signed off by our reporting analytics team to ensure that we have a consistency across our entire reporting suite. As I mentioned previously, one of the benefits of having an ad hoc approach to dashboarding was it allowed analysts to be creative with what they were creating. And we were really conscious that actually by putting these templates in place, it may actually impact on this and or may also have an adverse effect on our team's self-development. So to combat this, we introduced a half day once a month to allow the team to focus on data visualization. And we basically gave them a random data set. There was nothing that wasn't related to Confused.com at all, and asked them to go away and build something new. So this allowed them to be creative again, but also encouraged them to try new things and learn new techniques that they wouldn't usually attempt in the dashboards they create and work. And ultimately, there was no pressure from any stakeholders to deliver something by a certain deadline either. So it gave the analysts real freedom to be adventurous and develop their dashboarding skills. We also had Tableau drop-in sessions every week, as Gemma mentioned before. So the team have support available to them from our reporting experts to help with any issues or advice that they need. And this is available to anyone around the business as well. So these are some examples of dashboards we've published recently that have gone through the sign-off process and used our brand template. So you can see that they're far more consistent than the examples we saw earlier in terms of style and branding. And this then instills confidence in the end users as they know that any dashboards with this styling have been signed off. And because they are stored in a certain folder on the server, they're using approved data sources, which will continue to update. So they can rely on this insight being accurate. So what have we learned so far on our journey? Well, one of the key things, but also one of the most obvious things, is that change doesn't happen overnight. We could easily build a new dashboard in a day, but it takes a lot longer to build up a whole new reporting suite and develop a new way of working within the team. Also, it takes a lot of resource and effort in order to make these kind of changes. And this will often mean reprioritizing workloads and moving team members away from other business work streams. And this is where the second point is really important as well. So the engagement with stakeholders is key to maximizing the chances of success during this type of change. So our team work mainly from a ticketing system, and our workloads are generally driven by what our stakeholders want us to do. So initially there was resistance that we were spending less time on their tickets and more time on the reporting structure. However, once we communicated our vision to those stakeholders and demonstrated some of the benefits of the new reporting structure, they were then able to see the big picture and then could see how these changes would actually benefit their own teams. So then they were far more supportive in allowing us the time and freedom to spend time developing the new structure. Another thing we learned was that it's really important to embed the culture across the wider business in order for it to be adopted fully. For us, this wasn't just about redesigning a few reports and rebuilding a few metrics. For us, it was about making fundamental changes to the structure of our reporting, but also, we even changed the definition and logic of some of our business critical measures in order to make them more relevant to the way we measure business performance. So it's critical that our stakeholders have the necessary training and support to understand these changes and the best practices going forward. Otherwise, there's a risk that they just won't engage with the new structure, or they just won't trust what they are being told by the data. Finally, the last thing we learned was to make use of the features available to us in Tableau to help make our reporting as structured and as accessible as possible. So by using tags on dashboards and using the folder structures available on Tableau server and using the descriptions available with dashboards, we're able to kind of split out dashboards that are in development and dashboards that are waiting sign off and dashboards that have already been signed off and ready for use. So this then makes it easier for stakeholders to find the information they need. And it also ensures they know what data they can trust. And if they can't find what they need, it makes our jobs as analysts easier as we know where to point them instead of having to just repeat existing work. So whilst we've made great progress to date, there's still a lot we want to achieve on our journey. So firstly, we want to embed a self-service culture around every team in the business. And to do this, we need three things. Firstly, we need performant and accessible self-service data sources loaded into Tableau. Secondly, we need training so that we have data champions embedded within every team. And finally, we need accurate and clearly defined metrics that everyone understands and can trust. The more people we can get around the business exploring data themselves and building their own dashboards, the fewer requests we get as an analytical team. So Tableau is a great tool to support this. Also, we want to ensure that everyone can access the reporting they need. And we'll do this by making best use of the tags in Tableau and ensuring every dashboard is named appropriately and makes it clear the question it is trying to answer. We'll also have a clear dashboarding hierarchy so every team member can go into Tableau and navigate around all the reporting available to them. And then they can see how different metrics interact with one another and what can drive a change in a certain metric. And finally, we want a consistent reporting suite. So we're well on our way to achieving this, but the more we can embed this approach across our entire analytics team, the more efficient we'll all be able to work across the business. So thank you for listening. If you do have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. But otherwise, back to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Dave. It's certainly been a journey, and I know there's lots more exciting things to come. So our next speaker is Chris Harry, and he'll be showing you how to make your dashes more interactive.
Hello, thank you, Rachel. So hi, my name's Chris. I've been at Confuse for 18 months now, and prior to that, I had no experience with Tableau. But working at Confuse, I use it nearly every day, I'd say, and yeah, it's a great tool. So I've fallen in love with it, and that's why I'm here doing the tug. So I'm going to talk about interactivity in Tableau, so how to make our dashboards a little bit more engaging. So really, why would that be something that we want to do? So often around a business, you have very different stakeholders that have different interests and requirements. So you might want to make your dashboard engaging so that they can come in and look at what's filtered to the sort of things they want to look at. For example, at Confused, we have a variety of product teams, but if we have a generic dashboard on a centralized topic, they're going to want to come in and search for their own particular products or their own particular partners who they look after. Second point, it can make it more visually engaging. So sometimes a little bit of interactivity and animation can make your dashboards look really slick. Third point, we can tell a wider range of stories. So often with a dashboard, you're confined to such little space. And I have a very bad habit of doing this, that I want to put so much information in that it would make my dashboard completely overwhelming. So making your dashboard more interactive, and they can sort of switch between views, etc. It means you can pack a lot more information into that dashboard. And also a problem I find with dashboarding as well is you don't necessarily know what the story is going to be in 6 months' time. So people talk about storytelling with data, but that's hard when you don't necessarily know what that story is going to be. So it also helps to sort of future-proof your dashboards and give the user the ability to go in and find the story for themselves. And last point is fun, really. I enjoy setting these things up. So I'll just skip over to like a quick demo. So imagine this is a dashboard, and up the top we have our high-level KPIs for the business, and then underneath them we have a breakdown of some information that accessory information to that KPI. So this dash is made using two data sets, Netflix and IMDb, and the functionality is created using a parameter, which they can sit across data sets. So it's really useful for switching between views between data sets. So for instance, when you hover over your KPI, you can see that it switches to the appropriate graph to help explain that KPI. There we go. So the way I've set this up is using parameter actions and a thing called sheet swapping. So just demo one more time. That when you hover, it changes, and you could also change this to a click action. It doesn't necessarily have to be a hover action. So how would we set something like this up? So firstly, we need to go through and set up our sheet structure in the way we want it. Then we're going to create a parameter to reflect this sheet structure. We're going to create all our calculated fields that help us show and hide the appropriate sheets. Then we're going to set up the sheet swapping within the dashboard within a container. And then we're going to create our actions, which really go off and do the magic behind the scenes. So if I escape presenter mode. So firstly, what I've done for this is I have 6 sheets arranged in pairs. So for instance, I've labeled the source sheets show whatever it is. So we got a show bar, show line graph, show histogram, and then the complementary target sheets, then one for each. So I've set them up. You don't necessarily have to have separate source sheets. You could have one sheet with multiple marks, and then you could set a parameter action to use the dimension you used in those marks. But I just chose to have 3 independent sheets. So really what we need to do as well, which is key for this, if we're taking the separate sheet approach, is to create a dummy variable. So I've got a calculated field here, which if I open it up, it's just bar chart. So for all the rows, it'll just say bar chart in my data set. And I've pulled that onto detail so that now this sheet has visibility of that dimension, and we'll need that later on when we're setting our parameter. And I've also done the same for my show line graph sheets using the line graph dummy variable and the show histogram dummy variable. So that's how I've arranged my sheets. Next up, we're going to create our parameter. So if I come back to one of the sheets. So you can come down to the bottom left, and if you right click, you can create parameters here. Oh, that's create calculate field, sorry. And you can create various different types of parameter based on the data type, and then you can use sort of validation rules as well to allow what you're going to input. So for my parameter, I edit, I've created a string type parameter, and it is a list, and it contains 3 items here. So you don't necessarily need to provide this as a list. I just like doing it this way to make sure that the parameter can only ever be in these 3 states and not in another state, which might break my visualization. Oh, another good tip about parameters, you can actually populate them from dimensions as well in your data sets. So that's set up. So we have 6 sheets now, a target and a source sheet for each, our KPI/vizzes, and a parameter which has those 3 options. So I now create calculated fields off this parameter. So if I come to my main viz sheets, if you look up here, I've got a calculated field, which if I go in is a Boolean field, and it just returns true or false depending on if the parameter is the same as what I'm interested in for this particular sheet. So for this sheet, I've got a histogram. So I want to know, does my parameter equal histogram? And I've set that as a filter to be true. So what that means is this sheet will only create a visualization when my parameter equals histogram. And I've also done this for my line graph sheets as well. So you can see now that, where is it gone? This one here, sorry. So this is the same setup equals line graph, and I've created the true filter. So what that means is that should be false. If you went in my data source, that field would be false for all rows because my parameter is not set to line graph. And I've done that for all 3 of my target sheets then. So come back to story. So now fourth step is to set up my sheet swapping. So sheet swapping is a really nifty feature of Tableau actually, and it's something I use quite a bit. So all it is really is if you use I can demonstrate like this. If you use a container and you put your sheets in here, if one of the sheets doesn't return a visualization, then Tableau will expand another sheet that does over the top of it. So effectively what it does is it minimizes the sheet that doesn't have any data returned and expands the sheet that does. So how I created this is I just dragged my 3 target sheets into a container. Sometimes it can be a bit fiddly. You have to make sure they don't have any titles. Otherwise, it still just returns a blank sheet with the title. Make sure you turn off the distribute contents evenly. And there we go. It expands my target sheet and minimizes the other 2. And then our last step then was to create our parameter action. So if we come up to the top in dashboards and we go actions, you can create a variety of actions here. And the one we're interested in is change parameter. So what we do is we're going to set our source sheet. So in these ones, for instance, I've set the show bar sheet to be my source sheet. And then the target parameter is my parameter, which is chart type. And I'm setting it to the dummy variable. So this is where that dummy variable really comes into play. It's just a string that the sheet has visibility of, that then we can then pass to the parameter. And then you can set however you want on the right hand side, however you want that to happen. So in my viz, I've got hover. So what this is saying is this action, when you hover on this sheet, set this parameter to the value of this field. And so I'll cancel that. And you can see how I've set that up here. The same, hover on my bar chart, show bar chart sheet. That sets my chart type parameter to the value of the bar chart dummy field. So what that does is you can imagine it as a sort of chain reaction. When I hover on my source sheet for the line graph, the parameter action will switch my parameter to say line graph in it. And then my calculated fields will either change from true or false to true, depending on what sheet they are and what I've filled them in with. And then the sheet swapping takes care of everything else and expands the sheet that is true and minimizes the one with the false filter. So that's it really. Thank you very much. I'll pass you back to Rachel.
Amazing, thanks, Chris. That was brilliant. Thank you so much for talking through it. Our last speaker is Sarah Bartlett, and she's going to be talking us through our Tableau certification journeys.
Hi, Rachel. Let me just share my screen. Hopefully you can see that okay. Great. Okay, so my name's Sarah Bartlett. I'm going to be talking to you about certifications in Tableau today and sharing some tips to help you get certified in Tableau Desktop. In terms of my background, sorry, my slides aren't moving. Here we go. I work as a senior consultant at Slalom, based in London. I'm a Tableau Zen Master Social Ambassador and a co-leader of the London Tableau user group. And I also founded a project called Iron Quest, which models kind of the Iron Viz competitions, and that runs every month within the Tableau community. Thank you for inviting me to talk at this event today. I'm really excited to be at your first event, and it's been great so far. I've really enjoyed the talks. If anyone wants to reach out to me, you can find me on Twitter. It's at Sarah Loves Data, or over on my blog, which is sarahlovesdata.co.uk. In terms of my professional background, I've been working in analytics for around about 12 years. I've been using Tableau for 7 years. Prior to that, I was fully in Microsoft Excel. So one of the talks earlier, I could totally resonate with. I've been using Tableau for the past 4 years in a consulting sense, so working with clients to help them on their Tableau journeys. I've got 3 certifications in Tableau, so the Certified Associate, Professional, and then most recently the Consultant, which is an exam specifically for partners. But it's funny that I actually waited around about 3 years before attempting my Tableau Certified Associate exam. And I'm going to talk more about that later because I think Tableau recommend you should wait around 3 months, and I put mine off for that long. But anyway, so you may be wondering, you know, why bother getting certified in Tableau? Like what benefits could it bring? So there's a couple of reasons why I think people should explore certifications. The first one would be to test your knowledge. And what I found when I was studying for my Certified Associate exam, it really identified, or helped me identify actually, the gaps that I had in my knowledge. So there was things that I thought I knew in Tableau, which I hadn't really ever touched upon, and studying for that exam made me actually go away and actually learn those things more thoroughly. These were often things that I hadn't really had the opportunity to use or hadn't had the need to use. So it was really good to actually strengthen my knowledge overall and fill in those gaps of knowledge. Obviously getting certified is a great way to prove your Tableau skills. I think sometimes if you're not on Tableau Public particularly, and you're doing a lot of Tableau work at work, your work never gets seen by anyone outside of your company. So then when perhaps if you're going for a new role, whether in your company or outside of your company, and you say I can use Tableau, it's quite difficult to prove that unless you have a certification or unless you have a strong Tableau Public portfolio. So obviously getting certified is great, and it's something you can put on your CV. It also shows that you've gone the extra mile. It shows that Tableau is important to you and you've taken the time out to actually go and get that certification, and that also helps you stand out from the crowd. And finally, of course, it's always great that Tableau actually reward people for getting certified with things like badges, t-shirts, and other swag, so that's always fun. In terms of the Tableau desktop certification paths, there's 3 Tableau desktop certifications. So the initial level that you can start at is specialist, and then you have certified associate, and then certified professional, which is the highest kind of level of certification. I'm going to talk through these each one by one and explain more about each of the exams and what you can expect. So the entry level exam is the specialist exam. This is the newest exam of the 3, and there's no prerequisites for this exam, so you can go in and take this without any other certifications. It's also the shortest and the cheapest, so it's 1 hour in duration. It costs $100 to take this exam. The current version that Tableau are testing on for all the exams I'm going to talk about today is 2020.1. Normally you'll find that Tableau are a couple of versions behind with their certifications, just because of the amount of time it takes to update the questions and things to reflect new functionality. The way this exam is structured is 30 multiple choice questions, and I'll go more into that in a minute. And you need to get 70% to pass. And the really great thing about this exam, unlike the others, is that it's valid forever. So once you've got it, you'll have it, and it will never expire. As I mentioned before, there's no prerequisites, so you could go and take this exam regardless of where you are on your journey. Tableau suggests that you should have been using Tableau for around about 3 months before attempting this exam. But obviously that's going to depend on how much you're using the tool, whether you're actually using it to build out visualizations or just consume things others have built, and really the breadth of what you're doing. Only you will know if you're ready. There's 30 multiple choice questions, and those are broken into 2 different types. So there's 22 theoretical. So those will ask things like, can Tableau do this, true or false? And there's also 8 hands-on questions. So the way that those work is Tableau will provide you with a data set, which you'll be required to connect to in Tableau Desktop, and actually use that data set to answer questions. So Tableau may ask a question such as, which state had the highest profit in July? And you'll need to be able to connect to that data and get to that answer using Tableau. It's important to note though that you don't submit that workbook, so it doesn't matter how messy it is or how you're getting to the answer. The main thing is you're getting to the right answer. And interestingly, all of these exams are open book, which means you can actually Google for answers if you get stuck. Now, I don't recommend doing this or relying on this, but it's good to have as a backup if you do get really, really stuck and you don't know the answer to one of the questions. But if you do rely on this heavily, obviously you'll run out of time. In terms of what this exam covers, it covers everything from connecting to data sources, manipulating data, sorting data, filtering data, right through to building charts and then creating visualizations with those charts. And along with that, you're expected to have an understanding of basic calculations, including table calculations and aggregations and things like that. But it won't go to a deep level on the calculation side. So for example, this exam isn't going to ask you to perform a nested level of detail calculation. That would be one of the more advanced exams. So to give you a sense of kind of some of the questions on this exams, I've actually included 2 questions from the specialist exam. These are on the practice paper that Tableau share in their exam guide. And we're just going to talk through how you can go about answering some of the questions. So again, these questions reflect what you might see on the exam. They aren't necessarily going to be on the exam. But what we're going to do is use a process of elimination to try and find the right answer with these. So this question is, which of the following can you use to create a calculated field that returns data independent of the data granularity in a view? Now I've got the 4 options down there. Now I can see that there are 2 level of detail options in the answer list. I'm actually going to park those level of detail calculation options for now and then explore B and C. So we look at option B, which is a table calculation. I know that table calculations rely solely on dimensions and measures which are in the view, allowing you to transform values at the viz level detail only. So given the question, I know that that answer can't be correct. And then option C, a basic calculation. If you think about basic calculations, they allow us to transform values at the data source or the row level, level of detail, and in the case of an aggregate calculation, the visualization level of detail, but they don't return data independent of the data granularity in the view. So I know that that's not correct either. So if we rule those 2 out and then go back to our level of detail calculation options, starting with A, an include level of detail calculation, I know that an include level of detail calculation it computes values using the specified dimensions in the calculation in addition to whatever dimensions in the view. So based on that, I don't think that's the right answer. And then if we think about a fixed level of detail calculation, those allow you to compute values at an entirely independent level of detail to what is in the view. And given that that's what the question is asking, I would say that D is the right answer. So hopefully you can see how we've used a process of elimination to get there. And that's a technique that I've found really useful when doing these multiple choice exam questions. Okay, so I have another question for you. So this one says, a field that shows average home values for the United States in 2016 is most likely to be a discrete date part dimension, a continuous date value dimension, a geographical dimension, or an aggregated measure. So looking at this question, we're looking for a field that shows average home values. So that probably means we're expecting to see a monetary value, probably a dollar value given it's United States. So based on that assumption, we can eliminate any options that mention date. So that will take out A and B. And I know that it's not a geographical dimension because that would be something like a state or a city. And obviously here we're looking at the entire United States. So that must mean that the answer is D, an aggregated measure, which would be correct as the aggregation in this case would be an average. So there we go. We've just gone through that process of elimination again to get down to the right answer. In terms of some exam tips specifically for this exam, I've looked at different blog posts written by the community and seen people kind of share their tips after taking this exam. And I've put together a list of some of the things that stand out and that are common across those materials. Everyone says you need to get hands-on in Tableau. So, and I strongly stand by that. If you're not using Tableau, you're going to struggle with any of the certifications. There's no better way of learning than actually getting stuck in and using it. You can watch all the videos and read all the blog posts that you like, but you really need to actually put some of this stuff into practice. When you're learning, I'd say utilize a variety of resources. There's just so much stuff out there, and most of it's free, so you've got no shortage of resources to use. But utilize the resources that help you learn best, whether that be reading blog posts or watching videos. Just pick those resources and utilize them as you see fit. There's a great blog series by Christine Reitman. Now, Christine was a student taking this exam, and she documented her study process and kind of like the hurdles she went through along the way. It's an incredibly helpful blog series for anyone taking the exam, and I've got the link there if you want to check that out. As with all of these exams, I'd say familiarize yourself with the exam study guide, which Tableau provides. This tells you exactly what to expect on each of the exams, and each of those guides gives some practice questions as well, so you can test yourself. And if you want to test yourself a little bit more, there's a website out there called learningtableau.com. Now, this isn't affiliated with Tableau, it's run by an independent consultant, but this website's great because you can pay around about, I think it's £10 or maybe a little bit less, and you get access to some practice papers for the specialist exam and the certified associate exam, and you can actually go through those papers just like you would in a real exam, and at the end you get a result. And they'll show you the questions you got wrong and also some solutions on how you can get to the right answer for those questions. I actually used this resource myself when taking the certified associate exam, and it was really helpful for me in identifying those gaps in my knowledge, and really helping me center in on the areas that I needed to study for. Also on learningtableau.com, there's some free tests, so you don't even have to pay anything, and you can actually take some tests for free specifically for the specialist exam. So maybe if you want to get a taster for what the exam's like, I highly recommend checking those out. Okay, so moving on, the next exam in this series is the Certified Associate exam. So this one is similar to the specialist, but you get 2 hours. It costs a little bit more, so it's $250. It's 36 multiple choice questions, pass mark 75%, and unlike the specialist, it's only valid for 2 years. There are no prerequisites, so you don't need to do the specialist exam first. You can go straight in at this level. The suggested product experience is 5 months. I took 3 years. So again, it's totally subjective and depends kind of where you're at on your journey. But it's important to note here that with this exam and also with the specialist, the focus is on accuracy rather than the journey. So as I said before, it doesn't matter how you get to the answer as long as you get to the right answer. The 36 multiple choice questions that you will see are going to be a mixture of multiple choice responses, true or false, or hands-on. And with the hands-on, it would be very similar to the specialist, where you're going into Tableau to connect to data and get essentially to an answer. If we look at the topic weightings for this exam, the 2 areas that carry the highest weightings are data connections and calculations. So data connections will be things like blends, joins, unions, and then calculations would be everything from aggregate calculations to table calculations to level detail calculations, sorry. And then you can see the other areas. We've got things like mapping, analytics, dashboards, but they all carry a slightly lower weighting. For the learning materials for this exam, these apply for any of the exams really, but I'd highly recommend getting involved in community projects. Things like Makeover Monday and Workout Wednesday could be really, really helpful in getting you hands-on in Tableau, and also maybe utilising different techniques that you might not use in your day-to-day work. There's a ton of free Tableau training videos out there. So if you go on the Tableau website and to their learning section, you'll find lots of videos which are all bite-sized and focused in on particular tools in Tableau that you can use. The Udemy courses I mentioned here are by the author of the learningtableau.com website. Again, not affiliated with Tableau, but I think they're really useful. If you're looking at YouTube, I'd definitely suggest looking at the channels by Tableau Tim and Andy Kriebel. They've both got hundreds of videos on Tableau and different techniques within Tableau. And if you're into books, I definitely recommend looking at Practical Tableau by Ryan Sleeper and A Big Book of Dashboards as well, just to get an idea of what you can do in Tableau and maybe to get some inspiration too. I think I've covered these already with the other exam, but I'd say just like the specialist, you can get some practice papers on learningtableau.com, and you can break the questions down into steps when you're attempting them. So for the hands-on questions, this would be if you're asked to look at something, maybe tell me what the profit was in July in Texas, then to help you get to that answer, I found it useful to filter for the state, filter for the month, and then really just filter your results down so you only have the data you need to help you answer that question. And there were a couple of areas that really tripped me up on this exam when I was preparing for it, at least. And those were things including trend lines, p-squared and r-values. And those were things I hadn't really used in Tableau at the time. So definitely have a look at studying those. Be confident in explaining box plots. So you might get a question around box plots or box and whisker plots, so be confident in explaining what those are and how they work. And you might be asked to provide some level detail calculation use cases. So in what instance might you use a level detail calculation? Okay, so moving on, final exam in the series is the professional exam. So no surprise, this is the longest of the three and the most expensive. So it's 3 hours in duration, and it costs $600 to take this one. It's unlike the other two, it's 100% hands-on. So there's no theory questions, no multiple choice, it's all hands-on. And the scoring is done based on a rubric. So there's not a pass percentage, but Tableau are looking at more things like have you applied best practices, and I'll go into that in a second. And there is a prerequisite for this exam, so you do need to have taken and passed the Certified Associate certification. So once you pass the professional exam, it almost supersedes the associate certification. And Tableau suggests you should have been using the product for around about 12 months or more before attempting this exam. In this exam, the focus is mainly on visual best practices, technical skills and storytelling. So not only are Tableau looking for you to get to the answers or present something that's visually compelling, but they also want to see best practices applied, as well as your technical skills and your storytelling skills. And you'll be asked a series of questions. So some are short, so it might be, how can we improve this visualization, to building out a scenario. So you might have a business case where you're asked to produce different charts, and all of those charts then go onto a dashboard, and you may be given a scenario where you're asked to present that to some stakeholders, and you might want to use story points to present your case in Tableau using that. So just bear that in mind, it's completely different to the other two exams. The resources I've shared here are all the same as the previous exams. The only addition I've added is the white paper, which Tableau wrote. It's free to get. It's called the Visual Analysis Best Practices, a guidebook. And this white paper is great because it tells you the best practices in terms of visual analysis that Tableau are expecting you to abide by. So if you study this guide, you'll get a real idea of what they're looking for. So when you're building out your charts in the exam, you can really hone in on those skills. In terms of my tips for this exam, I'd say, as always, read the study guide and attempt the practice questions. With this exam, it's really critical that you get hands-on in Tableau and just get lots of practice. And because you only get 3 hours, I know it sounds like a lot of time, you will be pushed for time, so you really need to be quick. This exam felt like Iron Viz to me, where you have to produce something quickly. Obviously, you don't need to produce something to that level of polish, but you do need to get a lot done in a short amount of time. So it's important that you're quick when building things out. So that's where things like Make of a Monday can help, because perhaps you could challenge yourself to complete a Make of a Monday in an hour, for instance, and really focus on building those things out quickly. Areas to focus for this exam, I would suggest having a look at parameters and being confident with things like top N and measure and sheet swapping using parameters. Nested LOD calculations is another one that you might experience in this exam, so definitely study those. That's where we have a level detail calculation inside another level detail calculation. You may have some requirements to do data joins and blends, so again, be confident with those. Story points may come up, so I know something that people don't often use, so just be confident using story points and understand how they work. And again, visual best practices is really key. Okay, so to recap, here's a short overview of those exams and the cost and the price compared. And I'll share these slides with you afterwards, so you've got a copy of them. Plus, you can get all the information on the Tableau website. Just some general exam tips before I finish. As we're living in a virtual world at the moment, all of these exams are actually run on a virtual machine and they're overseen by a proctor. So what that means is you'll log onto your laptop and then you'll have someone watching you, and they'll prompt you to log on to a virtual machine, and then they'll watch you. And I know that sounds really weird, but they'll watch you for the duration of the exam, just to make sure that you're not cheating, there's no one sitting next to you telling you answer, and that kind of thing. When you do that, you'll only be able to use a single screen. So if you have 2 screens, they'll ask you just to use your laptop screen, for instance. And doing the whole setup process can take a while. So just be patient and work with them and do what they say. They expect you to have your official ID to hand, so you can kind of hold up your driving license or passport to the camera and prove you are who you say you are. And they'll also ask you to spin your webcam around to show the room that you're in, just to make sure there's nobody there, or you haven't got a load of notes with you or anything like that. It's a good thing. It's always good to test your Wi-Fi before attempting this exam. I know someone whose Wi-Fi kept cutting out midway through the exam, and she had to retake the exam multiple times because of that. So just be careful. And if your Wi-Fi is not reliable, perhaps go into the office or go somewhere where you've got a more reliable connection. And lastly, don't talk. I know that sounds silly, but some people are prone to talking to themselves. And I know that can cause issues with proctors sometimes because they think you're talking to somebody or perhaps communicating with somebody through a microphone. During the exam, it's always good at the beginning to familiarise yourself with the scoring framework, which will be flashed up at the start. And you don't have to follow the exam in the order that it's presented. So you could start at the end and work backwards. You could start in the middle. You could start wherever you want. I personally found, especially with the specialist exam, that it was helpful to start at the beginning because that exam kind of builds you up to more lengthy questions. So it was good to have like a bit of a warm up before moving up to those. But that's not for everyone. I know some people that started at the end and worked backwards. Be careful not to miss any questions. I know that I nearly missed an entire section in the professional exam because I didn't scroll down on the screen. So just be sure you've covered everything. Try not to spend too long on a particular question. In all 3 exams, you have the option to bookmark questions and go back to them later. So if you do get stuck, just put a bookmark on, finish other questions and go back to tackling those. And 2 final tips: if you're taking the professional exam, I'd say try and be descriptive with your chart titles. So rather than having a chart with a title such as the profit in 2020, try and actually call out what the chart shows. So say in 2020, the profit was the highest in whatever, and you'll find that will help you with that exam, because if you asked to do a story at the end, you can actually utilize those titles that you've given to tell a more compelling story. And finally, just try and be practical and not flashy in your designs. It's not a competition. It's not designed so you can build something that's really amazing or your best work. It's really important that what you build is just practical. It gets to the point that you're trying to get across, and it utilizes those visual best practices. I'd say just to help you with any of these exams, it's really helpful to leverage the broader Tableau community. So I've listed a couple of things here you can do to get involved, but obviously joining Tableau Public would be my #1 tip. You could share all your work on there. You can start building out a Tableau Public portfolio, and you can also get inspiration from other people's work. It's my #1 go-to source if I'm ever building out a new dashboard and I want some inspiration. There's a ton of community projects out there as well. So things like Make for Monday, Workout Wednesday, Sports for Sunday, Iron Quest, which is the one I run. But there really is something for everyone. So if you're looking for more ways to practice, looking for exposure to different data sets, perhaps a little bit different to what you do at work, definitely check those community projects out. There's a ton of learning opportunities to be had there. Engage in social media. So there's a big Tableau community globally that are on social media platforms such as Twitter or LinkedIn. So definitely look at engaging with the people on there. Everyone's really friendly and will welcome you in with open arms, and they'll be really supportive if you've got any questions about anything Tableau related as well. You can also go on social media to get feedback on your work. So perhaps you've done a viz for one of these community projects and you're looking to improve your work and get some feedback. There'll be experts on there that are willing to help you for sure. The community put out a lot of content, whether that be blog posts or videos on YouTube. So definitely check out those resources. There's just so many, it's difficult to keep up, but chances are if you get stuck with something, someone's probably blogged about it or done a video on that topic. If not, head over to the community forums and over there you can ask questions if you get stuck with things in Tableau, or you can actually look at questions other people have asked before and look at the answers. Or if you're feeling ambitious, you could actually go on there and answer questions where other people are struggling, because I found that can be really helpful in improving your skills as well. So my top tips for getting certified would be to practice lots. So it's absolutely critical that you actually get in Tableau and use it. Utilize Tableau training resources. So whether that be the e-learning videos or the training videos you can get online for free, they're all really, really useful in improving your skills. And then #3 would be engage in the community. So just really utilize all the work the community put out there to help you on your Tableau journey. And so hopefully that's inspired you to get certified. And if you do get certified, don't forget to celebrate your success. So share your badge on LinkedIn or Twitter and with your colleagues and put it on your CV. It's really something to be. If you want to reach out to me, I've got all my contact details on the screen there, and I'll be happy to help with any questions you've got on certifications. Plus, if you head over to my blog, I've got a couple of blog posts on the exams I've spoken about today as well. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you so much, Sarah. Really interesting information. And really appreciate your time. We appreciate all our speakers' time today. It's been such a lot of information, so we hope you found it useful. I'm going to pass you over to Gemma now to wrap up on our first ever Cycles 10.
Thank you. So sorry we've run over a little bit of time today. We really hope you enjoyed the session. I mean, no doubt you would have found some really interesting information that you can take away and put into action. And don't forget to go back and watch everything on the Tableau YouTube channel. Also check out the Tableau website for all of the information on certification. There's so much information that you can have a look at and decide which path is right for you. I'll certainly be going on there and doing my next exam. We're going to be back later this year with another event, so keep a lookout for updates on that. And once again, thank you so much to all our speakers. And finally, if you would like to present at any of our future events, just get in contact. So thank you, and see you next time.